Welcome to the Dental Decoders Podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Rogars, and I'm here to help you crack the code on all things dental operations. Each week, we dive into topics to help you overcome roadblocks, streamline operations, and reduce team burnout. Whether you're an owner, a practice manager, or a team member, this podcast is for you. Join us for insightful discussions, engaging interviews, and practical tips. So sit back and relax as we crack the code on all things dental operations together. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Dental Decoder Podcast. My name is Brittany, and I am going to be solo today. I'm so excited to be bringing you our very first solo mini episode. In these episodes, we're going to be talking about things that fall specifically into our area of expertise. So when you have mini episodes with me, we'll be talking open dental software and revenue cycle management. When you have mini episodes with Rebecca, you'll be talking staffing, HR, operations, all that good stuff. We found that this is going to be a really good way for our audience to get the most out of each of our brains while still being able to provide you really fun and engaging content every single week. So we're just going to sprinkle in some of these mini episodes here so you guys have some key takeaways that you can quickly digest on your way to and from a meeting or on your commute. These episodes will never be more than 15 minutes. They're all designed to be very bite-sized little pieces of information for you. So without further ado, let's dig into today's topic. The first thing that I want to talk about, especially considering the basis of all of my conversations with you, will be on revenue cycle management and open dental software. I think the best place for us to get started is the foundation of your revenue cycle, which is a staff-facing financial policy. Most practices have a financial policy in effect that goes in their new patient packet, and their patients don't really read it. They just sign it to get onto the next sheet. And that's kind of where their financial policy ends. That's it. However, that policy is designed to explain to your patients what they can expect in your practice. We don't have a document to explain to your team members what they should expect and how they should handle certain situations. And that is going to lead to a breakdown in the communication between your team and your patients. It's also going to make it very difficult for you to manage a revenue cycle if you don't have something in writing saying how that looks in your practice. The most common thing I see when I go into offices is, well, we don't have it in writing, but the old practice manager told me that this is how she used to do it. And so this is how I do it, and it's just kind of is what it is. It's very willy-nilly, which in some cases may work. That's great. However, more often than not, without having some structure in place, especially if you have a large team or a growing team, it's not going to set you up for success. Also, long gone are the ways of sending a bill once a month and hoping for the best. Things have evolved so much since that old practice manager told you how to run your revenue cycle that it's really important to have something in writing, not only so I understand, so my patients understand, but so everyone on the team understands and anyone who joins our team later can understand. We don't need to pass down these traditions anymore because we have something in writing that actually helps us understand how and why we do things. So let's dive into what goes into a staff-facing financial policy so you can start to draft one of these for your practice right away. I will also put a link in the show notes that leads to my website. I have a revenue cycle management toolkit. Inside that toolkit, there's tons of practical takeaways that you can use inside your office. If you're using open dental software, there's even sheets that you can load right into the software for you. So all the hard work is done. If you're not, there's still going to be pieces of information that are helpful for you. All of this to say that one of the examples in there is a staff-facing financial policy that you are free to use. So what goes into a good financial policy? First, we're going to have all of the different forms of payment that we offer in our office and when we use these. So just like the patient-facing financial policy, it'll talk about we accept MasterCard, Visa, Apple Pay, Zelle, Venmo, whatever your office is using to accept payments. And it'll also talk about what are the limitations that come with these? A lot of practices have in-house membership platforms that they're using or services that they're offering to their patients, and those come with exclusions. We're not allowed to run credit cards when someone is getting a discount for their in-house savings plan. Those types of things should be listed out in this document, so any nuances are in there for you. Also, if you have a threshold on the dollar amount that you allow for any sort of in-house financing, that should be listed in there. Do we allow our patients to pay half at prep and half at seat? Do we allow our patients to split things up over 3 monthly payments? If we're allowing them to have monthly payments, is that required to be auto drafted? What if they want to pay with a check? What happens if their monthly payment is late? What does a default on one of those plans look like? All of that should be spelled out in there. Also, if you have a amount where you're saying any treatment over this dollar amount has to be referred out to a third-party financing option like Care Credit, Sunbit, Cherry, any of those options, that should be listed out in this policy as well. Those are all of the things that should also be listed in your patient-facing document, but it should be spelled out more in depth in your staff-facing document so they know if this, then that. And it really gives them the tools that they need to be able to have a successful financial conversation with the patient. The next piece of information that should be listed inside your staff-facing financial policy is fees. Are we charging financing fees? If we have to send a bill, is there a billing charge? If a patient defaults on an in-house savings plan or a payment plan that we have in our office, are we charging them fees? Is there interest that comes with an in-house financing option? What happens if they break an appointment? What happens if a check bounces? All of these fees that we may have to pass on to our patient should be spelled out exactly what that looks like inside your staff-facing financial document. One great example is, are we passing on credit card fees to our patient? This has become very hot topic in the industry lately. Some offices love it. Some offices hate it. I am going to completely avoid my opinions on it. But if you are passing on your fees to your patient, that should be spelled out in this document. Same with care credit fees. How is our office handling these third-party financing or care credit charges that are happening because we're allowing those third-party financing? The next piece of any good staff-facing financial policy is going to be the rules surrounding adjustments or discounts. So this is not talking about write-offs, although a conversation should be had about how your office handles write-offs and how that pertains to like non-covered benefits and your state laws. But that's a totally another episode that we'll have to have. But this should be more about what are you allowed to do as an employee as far as discounts go? What adjustment types do we use in our office and when do we use them should be in there, as well as how much am I allowed to give as a patient courtesy or for patient satisfaction to make this patient happy before I need to get approval from someone on my leadership staff, whether it be my office manager, my owning doctor, whatever that looks like in your practice. This will give me the autonomy to make some of these decisions without having to run and ask my busy manager every 5 minutes, this patient wants 10% off for XYZ reason. This patient said they got a senior discount back in 1996 when the old doctor was here. Those types of questions don't need to be run by me. I, as the office manager, am busy doing other things with my time. So having this written out in a policy gives you the autonomy to make the decision you need to make that patient happy. And it saves burden from me, and it makes them feel a lot more empowered in their role. There is so much power that comes from having employees who are feeling fulfilled in their role, and allowing them to make some of these higher level decisions is really going to go a long way in making sure that your employees are happy at your practice. The last piece that I believe every good financial policy should have is an accounts receivable timeline. From the beginning of your revenue cycle to the end of your revenue cycle, what does that look like in your office? This should start with a table of what happens on the new patient phone call. Are we gathering the insurance information at that time? Who is verifying the insurance? And when is that verified? How far in advance? What does verifications look like for you guys? Do you have a set sheet that you fill out for every single verification? Do you outsource to a third party like SKF Practice Solutions, shameless plug, or do you handle those internally? What does that look like in your practice from the verification standpoint? Then we will go into our patient's first visit. Are we collecting payment at that time of service based on the estimate that we got by getting our verification done? Are we sending pre-auths out? Are we waiting for pre-auths to get scheduled? Once that patient leaves our practice, if they have to get a bill, how many statements are we sending before they're considered in default? Is it they get 3 statements? Is it they get 1 statement? When does the first statement go out? Is it right when insurance pays, or is it the once a month that you run your billing? I strongly recommend running your billing dramatically more than once a month, just as a side piece to this puzzle. But this should be laid out in your AR timeline. Then once your account gets to the area where it's considered in default in your practice, what are you doing to try to remedy that? Are you making a phone call to the patient? Are you sending a letter? Are you doing both? What time frame do you have to get those procedures accomplished? At the end of that life cycle, when we turn it over to collections, are we writing it off? Are we sending the patient a dismissal letter? How are we navigating that specific situation when an account goes into collections? If you have that entire timeline spelled out from start to finish, from first visit to payment in full, hopefully, or turning over to collections, there's not a lot of room for your team to be confused on what that process is looking like. It also empowers them to ask the patient for their payment on their day of service if that's what you're doing, because they know that if they don't collect that payment amount, they have to make that dreaded pre-collections call later. And they can save the patient the whole headache of having to do the billing process if they are confident in asking that patient for money up front. So spelling everything out in that AR timeline is going to save you a huge headache later. And it's also going to make sure every single member of your team, whether it be a clinical team member or a front desk team member or your treatment coordinator or your practice manager or even your doctors, everybody knows exactly what happens to an account when it enters your office. So just to recap everything that we've gone over, we are going to be creating staff financial policies that talk about the different forms of payment that we offer in our office and when we allow those forms of payment. We're going to go over the different fees that may be associated with different things in our practice. And we're going to talk about adjustments and discounts and when we can honor those. And we're going to have a full AR timeline in there. This does not have to be a 50-page document. You don't have to have an SOP for every single step of the way, however you can. But it should be a very in-depth document that maybe is page or 2 long, so they know exactly what everything looks like in your practice. And if they have any questions, they know they can go check that document and find out exactly what the answer is. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of Dental Decoders. I can't wait to catch you next week. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Dental Decoders Podcast. We hope you took away a valuable piece of information. As always, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to help us build our community of dental decoders. We look forward to seeing you for next week's episode.